There's a conservatism rooted in the NFL. Like, that's a fact. So also take a shot every time I say that's a fact on this podcast. Hey Gaspers, and welcome back to Gasp the Pod. Today we are talking about politics. Don't get scared. Don't get scared. Trust me, it's going to be a very fun episode. We're going to be talking about celebrity endorsements, the controversy surrounding them. We're going to talk about Chappell Roan, of course. Taylor Swift, Beyonce, the Trump aspect of this election. So yeah, we're going to talk about some very interesting, fun, controversial things. I have some hot takes, which is the whole point of this podcast. So just a reminder, it's okay if we disagree on like these little things. So if you disagree with me, don't stop listening. That's just the whole point of the podcast is I'm going to have some hot takes. But I think most of us here all agree on like the basic things and like human rights and, you know, that Trump is a fascist and all that kind of stuff, right? So like, it's okay if we disagree in the small things, but I'm going to have some hot takes. Do you guys like my shirt? It says comma law. Just a few housekeeping things. First off, if you have not voted yet, please, for the love of God, vote. Not just local elections. Please vote for president and do not vote third party. It literally will not make a difference. A vote for third party this year is a vote for Trump. Point blank, period. We can get into this a little bit further. I'm totally not against a third party system or like having other people besides a Democrat and Republican like run for office, but that will not happen 7 days into the election, like before the election, right? So like there's no way we're solving the entire system right now. Either Kamala or Trump will be president. Please pick one. And please pick Kamala. Oh my Jesus Christ. I think there's no one here that's going to vote for Trump. If you're listening to this and you're voting for Trump, stop hate watching me. Please vote. It really makes a difference this year. I'm voting absentee in California. I was trying to vote in New York or Virginia. My parents live in Virginia. I just moved to New York, but it was like too late to process all the registration by the time I moved. So I'm voting absentee in California, but that still really matters. So even if you're in like solid blue state, please vote for president. Like it's going to be one of the closest races we've ever seen. I need to remember right now, I saw this stat the other day. This is a closer race now than it was like even months out in the 2020 election. So like this is going to be a very, very close race and literally every vote counts. And that really pushes us into what I'm going to talk about today, which is why I think celebrity endorsements do matter if you have a great enough following, right? Let's just start off this podcast and let's dig right into Miss Taylor Allison Swift. Okay, so in 2016, Taylor Swift did not publicly endorse a candidate. A lot of backlash happened after this because people were like, wait, is she secretly a Trumper? And we need to remember a lot of her fans are not necessarily like liberal or like even care about basic human rights. Like a lot of Swifties are homophobic. Not you guys though, but a lot of Swifties are homophobes. And she has a very wide audience. So there's a lot of people that were like, oh, hell yes, she's like a MAGA queen. And in 2018, she became political for the first time, or publicly political, when she pretty much went against Marsha Blackburn, who was running for Tennessee office, Senate in Tennessee. So Marsha Blackburn was like super homophobic against all these bills that protect women, obviously pro-life and all these things. So Taylor Swift made a post and she was like, this is affecting my hometown and I need to say something. We cannot get Marsha Blackburn elected. And in 2020, she kind of followed this and endorsed Kamala Harris and Joe Biden for president. Joe Biden for president and Kamala Harris for vice president. And in her documentary, Miss Americana, she was saying like one of the reasons why she decided to like step up is that she wanted to like make sure that the confusion around her like was settled, that people knew Like, she didn't know that people thought that she was a Trump supporter until 2016. And she talks about how in 2016 she like just wasn't in the healthy mind to like be political, which is so fair because she was probably going through a breakup with Carly Kloss, and also was obviously facing this like huge public backlash. So she wanted to like make her wrongs right. And she talks about how Todrick Hall, one of her best friends, was like, who's gay, was like, if you had a gay son, like if you had a gay kid, how would you react to that? And Taylor Swift was like, wait, you don't think I would react well to that? Obviously, because she's also gay, but that's for a whole other episode. And we have covered that and we will continue to cover that. But she was like, I need to make sure that people know where I stand. And that's kind of the backdrop to all of this, right? So in 2020, she endorsed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. There were mixed reviews when this happened. A lot of articles are saying, and I'll read from one right now, that like this didn't do anything and this didn't change anything. But we need to remember that like celebrity endorsements, or like, this is my opinion, are not necessarily to convince people who didn't like her already or who were conservative Taylor Swift fans to become liberal. Obviously, like that's the ideal scenario, but I don't think in practice that's what it's doing, and I don't even think we need that from them, right? The whole point is to galvanize the people that already agree with the same values that Taylor Swift has, which is like pro-choice, LGBTQ rights, and make sure that they vote. Because in this election, I know we're focused a lot on like swaying people away from Trump, and that's super important. But it's going to be such a close election that like we need every Democrat and every liberal to vote, especially young people, that there's millions of young people that this is their first election. So having a celebrity reach out to her fandom, which she's the most famous person in the world right now, probably, and say, just click on this link and register to vote, giving people a way to do it that may have already agreed with her, but then just didn't like take that extra step, is super influential. We don't necessarily need celebrities to like be the convincers. Okay, like that's for the campaign to do. And that'd be awesome. I'm sure she's maybe convincing a few people. But like a lot of these stats and these articles are like, oh, it's not going to convince people. Like people are actually, the conservative fans even hate her more now. It's like, yeah, that's so true. Like we want conservative fans to change their minds. But we also just need to make sure that every single Democrat votes. There are more Democrats than there are Republicans. Let me check on that. There are more Democrats than there are Republicans. So we need every single Democrat to vote because Republicans have a higher voting rate. This is a fact. And I worked in politics and I know this. Republicans will always go out and vote. We need Democrats to do the same, even if you don't agree with the majority of Kamala Harris's policies. Because at the end of the day, it's literally about saving democracy and saving our rights. So that's the background of Taylor Swift from 2020. In the Miss America documentary, highly recommend you go back and watch it. She's talking with her dad and some of these other people on her management team that are obviously very close to her, and her mom supporting her because of course. And I'll read you what she says in Miss Americana. A lot of what she says in this documentary also informs how Gaylors think about her and her career. And like, yes, she's so fucking famous, but like her decisions impact her career and what she says politically, and like, and how she identifies, perhaps as possibly queer, is queer. That vastly affects who listens to her. And these decisions are not just made purely by herself. Taylor Swift is not just a person, she's also a brand. And her management is like part of her family, and they're advising her to maintain this brand. So what can you do to lose half of your listeners? This is what her dad and her management says in Miss Americana when Taylor Swift says that she wants to speak publicly about politics. He says, what if I said right now you could cut your listeners in half? Imagine what happened if she says, I'm queer. Besides being like I'm an ally. There's a huge difference between saying I'm an ally and saying I'm queer. And I believe she is queer and she's been saying that, but making this huge statement that's for straight people would make her lose viewers and make her lose popularity. And there's a brand behind her that does not want that to happen. There's a team behind her that does not want that to happen. So Taylor Swift says in her documentary, she says, part of the fabric of being a country artist is don't force your politics on people. We saw this in what happens with the Chicks, formerly known as the Dixie Chicks. And they came out against George Bush and they pretty much lost their entire career, right? And that's not the crazy, that could still happen today. And it still happens today. Beyonce, a country artist, has literally been shunned by the country community pretty much from her, like, due to racist reasons because she's Black. So this continuously happens. And it's not the craziest thing that, you know, a brand and a celebrity has to think twice about what they're going to say politically. But it also really does matter. And even though it's a risk, it really is important, I believe. Okay, so she says, quote, in the Miss Americana documentary, and this is literally her arguing with her team about wanting to say something political. She says, it really is a big deal to me. Marsha Blackburn votes against fair pay for women, votes against the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which is just basically protecting us against domestic abuse and stalking. And then she points to herself and repeats stalking. And also, let's remember, she was assaulted. So this is influencing her as well. She says Blackburn thinks that if you are a gay couple, or even if you look like a gay couple, and I thought that was interesting because that's important to her. You should be allowed to be kicked out of a restaurant. It's really basic human rights, and it's right and wrong at this point. It's so true. It says, Dad, I just need you to forgive me for doing it because I'm already doing it. And she was also saying, and during the Miss Americana documentary, that she was saying this to her dad, these are not your dad's Republicans. The Republican Party is not just like fiscal conservatism. It is loudly racist and it's going to end the Constitution. I mean, like, Donald Trump wants to get rid of the Department of Education. He wants to get rid of the Department of Justice, et cetera, et cetera. So the larger point is that in 2020, Taylor Swift was very loudly political. And I think us as a liberal part of the fandom, we were thinking this is going to continue. I will say that ever since the Eras Tour started, we need to remember her fan base grew exponentially. And there were a lot of people that weren't necessarily Taylor Swift fans that became kind of like obsessed with like the momentum of the fandom and the Eras Tour and Taylor Swift and girlhood and Barbie, etc. And this attracted a lot of conservatives and homophobic Christians, might I add, and people around the world. So ever since then, I haven't seen her be political like at all. And especially her associating with the NFL and like Kansas City Chiefs. And a lot of these teams are owned by like these corporations that like donate to Trump. And like there's a conservatism rooted in the NFL. Like that's a fact. So also take a shot every time I say that's a fact on this podcast. But her association with Travis Kelce, the NFL, and like football really galvanized her kind of like right part of her base and her Christian conservative base. And there was a lot of people that were like, oh my God, love, like it leaned into the patriarchal aspect of America. So I had a fear, but I had hoped, and I'm so glad I was right, that she was going to abandon kind of her like liberal ideals because now there's a huge portion of America that's like a fan of her again, and she wants to appeal to everyone and not lose these fans. I'm very glad that she decided to endorse Kamala Harris. But of course, that didn't come without pressure from her fans. And that's why it's so, so important to hold celebrities accountable and remind them that we need this from them. And it's not enough to just say that every 4 years you're voting for a president. Like I did need her consistently in the last few years to be more vocal about like trans rights and LGBTQ rights and I mean, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I don't think that like we got enough from her on that. There's a lot of, this is my hot take. This is where my hot take comes in, is that a lot of people say, oh, we don't, Taylor Swift doesn't owe that to us. I think she does. I think Taylor Swift and billionaires, and this is no hate, I think this is a very normal relationship to have with celebrities that make money from us streaming and viewing and listening to her content and her music. I think these celebrities, especially when they're billionaires, they do owe us. I think we are owed her politics. And she is going to vote for a candidate that is pro LGBTQ rights, pro women's rights, pro the right to choose. This is something she says that she cares about. So I do think we are owed her endorsement. I do. Like, we pay her as a billionaire, and as LGBTQ fans, as women fans, as like people of color who are fans of her, we need to know that she like supports our basic human rights to continue to listen to her. And I'm so glad that after a lot of fans like wondering, and including me being like, where is Taylor Swift in this election a few months ago, that she came out and said, yes, I'm voting for Kamala Harris because of these reasons. And a lot of people were like, you shouldn't have doubted her. You shouldn't have doubted her. It's not about doubting. It's not even about her as an individual. It's about using your billion-dollar platform for something good. And she did. And it's important for people to like hold billionaires accountable and question and ask and make sure that they are like putting their money where their mouth is. And not just like letting go of their policies just because they're suddenly more famous with the NFL. And I'm so glad she didn't just like, I think I had a theory, and I still kind of hold on to this theory, that her association with the NFL and like middle America and like conservative moms and Christian women and these like straight Swifties and like men, right? Like men in football and the dads of Swifties, was to galvanize this voter base and get them out to vote in this election. And I think she did just that. She was also spotted with Brittany Mahomes right after Brittany Mahomes at the US Open, right after Brittany Mahomes said that she like reposted Donald Trump's plan for America. And that included like banning books, getting rid of the Department of Education, banning free speech in public schools, like increasing tariffs. We need to remember Donald Trump is not good for the economy. All of these things that are so hateful. And Taylor Swift was spotted with Brittany Mahomes after that. I think it's so fair to be like, who do you hang out with in your life? I'm so glad that after that, she did endorse Kamala Harris. Let's talk about the reaction to her endorsement for Kamala Harris. And Tim Walz, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's making no difference. No one cares what a celebrity thinks. Cool. We didn't ask very conservative people if they were going to suddenly vote for Kamala Harris when Taylor Swift endorsed her. No one thought that. At least no one who was educated thought that. I didn't think that. We're talking about people who are maybe a little disillusioned with how politics are. Maybe it's their first time voting. Maybe there's people that, and we can talk about this with Chappell Roan, are concerned about Kamala Harris's stance on Palestine, which I am deeply concerned about her stances on Palestine. And we know we cannot let Donald Trump be president. So it's getting these groups of people a little bit more fired up about the idea of voting and including a link to vote. So let's check the stats. Also, she signed off as a childless cat lady, which goes to show her connection with lesbianism and witches. That was a little nod to my last episode. It's a fuck you to JD Vance and anyone trying to pander to women right now. Like, we're not fucking idiots, okay? A lot of people say the endorsements don't mean anything, but Peter Mancusi, an attorney, and this is from Northeastern Global News. He's a crisis manager and associate teaching professor of journalism and at Northeastern University. He says that Swift's endorsement may nudge undecided voters towards Harris, bucking traditional wisdom that says celebrities don't have an impact. A lot of this traditional wisdom also comes from celebrities that are not like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is like a political leader herself. There was, I think, like an article out a year ago saying that like Taylor Swift like would win an election if she run if she ran for president. Okay, after she endorsed Kamala Harris, this kind of goes to show that there's like a conservative backlash to her whenever she says something political or like pro LGBTQ or pro women or like anything that doesn't support like Trump and like hyper patriarchal conservative views, right? So she endorsed Kamala Harris. Her Spotify numbers dropped by 2 million after this. So, yeah, it's impacting her career, but it's extremely important to the majority of her fans. Okay, so there were some articles saying that this actually hurt Kamala Harris's campaign. I fundamentally disagree with this. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I think when you actually look at the stats, that's a misleading article. The stats conducted by Quinnipiac University, it says more than 3/4 of likely voters say that Taylor Swift's endorsement of Kamala Harris does not make a difference in their level of enthusiasm. Okay, that's great. Like, for example, it didn't make me more likely to vote for Kamala. I was already going to vote for Kamala, right? So it's probably including those voters as well. 9% says it makes them more enthusiastic, and 13% says it makes them less enthusiastic. So these 13% are not even necessarily Taylor Swift fans. Remember, people still hate her. So I don't really think that actually hurt Kamala Harris's campaign. These were probably people who already hated Taylor Swift and were like, yeah, fuck that. So there's a Newsweek poll that found that 34% of Gen Z voters were either more likely or significantly more likely to vote for a Swift endorsed candidate. So I do really think that Taylor Swift can make a difference in this election and has made a difference in this election. And I think other celebrities need to follow suit. There were rumors that Travis Kelce was going to endorse Kamala and Tim. I'm very disappointed that he has not endorsed them. He didn't even like Taylor Swift's post. What kind of couple does that? Like, she makes this like big announcement of an endorsement and he doesn't even like her Instagram post. What the fuck? Besides her like trying to convince people to vote for Kamala Harris, this is going back to like the importance of voting. Swift's endorsement for Harris, and it included a vote.gov link for people to register to vote. It got almost 400,000 clicks. That's 500,000 people that looked up their voting site. We're going to talk about Beyonce, and then we're going to finish by talking about Chappell Roan and all of that controversy. And I have another hot take. The strategy of celebrities and how they go about political endorsements is really important. This is not just random, and it shouldn't be random. Cue Chappell Roan. But you do have to be very strategic and think about what you're saying and if it's going to offset a candidate and how influential it's going to be. I've worked in multiple political jobs, and even just the slightest wording of something I know will set off a conservative. Can I say this? Yeah. I've done like political spy work, and I've like sat in on conservative rallies and conservative meetings, and people thought I was a conservative. I like pretended to be conservative. I had a fake name and everything. I think I can say this because I'm out of this job. And I got really familiar with the rhetoric and how to not set off a conservative, right? So like I'm very familiar with this type of wording, and I know in campaign strategy, this is not just like these are very fine-tuned specific things that we say and we don't say because we know how it's going to be spun on like Fox News and on like right-wing media. But I know that like Taylor Swift's team was talking to Kamala Harris's team. Like that had to have happened. I know that Taylor Swift wants to be like very careful when she even says like her own statements. So I know she wanted to make sure that this was like okay for her to say. I do think that like Beyonce did as well. I think that Beyonce did not perform at this latest rally in Houston because of the controversy that happened and all the pushbacks she got from conservative media in 2016. So I think she was like, I need to not perform, but really have just like a speech and be like, I'm coming to you as like a mother. And that's what she did in Houston. The other reason why they went to Texas, a lot of people are like, wait, why are they in Texas? Obviously Beyonce is from Houston, but also these are voters that like we can get out of Texas. Texas is a very blue state. Obviously it's more red than blue, but we have a very big chance here with Colin Allred. So I think that a lot of the reason why Kamala Harris and Beyonce were in Texas is also to make sure Colin Allred gets elected. So there's so many things to think about here. And if you are as big and powerful as like Beyonce and Taylor Swift, they're thinking about these and you have to think about it because everything you do makes a difference, which is so annoying that you have to be so careful and perfect. That's what women, especially women of color, have to deal with. So let's talk about how if Beyonce and her endorsement of Harris, and especially using her song Freedom, makes a difference at all in this election. So Bowling Green State University professor David J. Jackson told Vox, he said, even though the effects are generally thought as modest for celebrity endorsements, in this election it's different. In elections that turn on a small amount of votes in a handful of swing states, any effect can be significant. We're not just thinking about Michigan. We're not just thinking about Pennsylvania, right? Like any of these states, it's going to come down to these small numbers. This is why it's so important for you to vote. And Beyonce, she has 314 million Instagram followers. Taylor Swift has 283. So Beyonce has even a larger Instagram audience than Taylor Swift. This is a huge voting block. So there's people that are like, I don't know, like, I don't know what to do. Maybe I'm just not tuned in. Maybe people are just overwhelmed with all the politics of everything. Even a few of these people having Beyonce say, listen, this is an important election. You need to vote. That can make a difference. Guys, let's talk about Chappell Roan. Okay. I have been avoiding this subject because I do think people have not necessarily avoided the root of the issue, which is like Palestine and politics and Kamala Harris's campaign and all of that. I never want to avoid that. But I have been avoiding Chappell Roan's comments. I don't think I need to say it on like TikTok. I think people get crazy. So we're going to talk about it on this podcast where less people are going to give me insane, hateful comments. One of the reasons why I left my last political job, which I'm not going to disclose, I was a political consultant, a senior political consultant advising specific candidates and campaigns on messaging and research based on opposition research I was doing on like conservatives, right? So all this is based on messaging. The reason why I left is because I was faced with this like moral decision that every single Democrat in office, every single one, local office, city office, mid-level office, president, like everything, president, business, every single one is receiving AIPAC money from Israel, right? And their conservative political PAC that is documentedly conservative. The influence that Israel has on American politics is pretty vast. And witnessing candidates that I was working for and working with have literally no second thoughts on what to talk about on what their stance was when it came to Palestine and Israel, literally pushed me out of politics. I couldn't do it anymore because I felt like I had no hope in politicians. Even AOC takes AIPAC money. It is so messed up what we're seeing in American politics right now. There's like literally zero empathy, and then we have no room for discourse about this. You can be so pro-Palestine and vote for Kamala Harris. Not to say that she's pro-Palestine. I disagree with like how this administration is handling it completely, and the fact that we still send money to Israel and to arm Israel is absolutely fucking ridiculous. And I know that we are not going to change this system if Donald Trump is president. We will have no ability to lobby the government. I've also lobbied Congress. We will have no ability to lobby the government. We will not even have a democracy. Okay? Coupled with the fact that women are going to lose reproductive rights across the board. We're going to lose the Department of Education. Trans kids are even going to be more at risk, right? That's why I believe that we need to vote for Kamala Harris. We will have more of ability to like rid Israel's imperialistic, genocidal effect out of American politics if Kamala Harris is president, more so than if Donald Trump is president. I want Kamala Harris to be president, and I need her to wake the fuck up. And the only way we're going to have a government that's sympathetic to Palestinians is if Kamala Harris is president. There is not a vote that you can cast that will save Palestinian lives. This is a fact. You just can't. Not at this stake in the election. We will have to use other means for that. There is a vote that will save Black, immigrant, women, and LGBTQ lives in America. And I still think that that's worth casting. And we can still hold our anger for Palestine. So I may just be preaching to the choir right now, but if you have people in your lives that you think are sitting out this election, are considering voting third party because of this, I totally hear you. And please send them this podcast or send them this clip or talk to them, because every vote is important. And there are people that will be coming out of the woodwork for Donald Trump. So we need every single person to vote for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris doesn't have to be your best friend. You don't even have to like any of her policies. It's about voting for one of the people that will be president. Okay, let's talk about Chappell Roan. So if you guys didn't see, so that's my hot take pretty much, that I think Chappell Roan was completely misguided and she shouldn't have said what she said. Chappell Roan, so there's been a lot of controversy. I'm not going to talk about I think it's totally fair for her to set boundaries with her fans and prioritize her mental health. That's not even about this. This is about her political statement. She is a new artist that obviously rose to fame very, very quickly. I'm not going to touch on too much about Chappell. I don't really talk about her much on my TikTok, mostly because we have mutual friends. I do think politics and her stance on politics is really important to comment on. So she first made a statement where she said there's problems on both sides and that she's not going to endorse a candidate, right? It's totally fair to say there's problems on both sides, but to say that without endorsing Kamala Harris, I think is incredibly dangerous. I also think she kind of came about it in a little bit of a careless way. She's very focused on people. I love Chappell. I'm a huge fan. She's very focused on making sure they refer to her correctly and saying calling her Chappell in public and not calling her Hailey. And then she incorrectly pronounced Kamala Harris's name. She said, she said, quote, "I'm fucking voting for Kamala." Saying Kamala, there's racial implications of that. To say to do your research and then not know how to pronounce the first potentially Black woman president, I think is careless and has huge implications on this election. The other thing is that she said, of course, I have encouraged people to use critical thinking skills to learn about what they're voting for, who they're voting for, and ask questions. So fair. But then she says, I'm not voting for Trump. And yes, I will be voting for Kamala, but I'm not endorsing her. There's a difference between endorsing and voting for sure. But when you're publicly saying about voting for someone, that's kind of an endorsement. So she kind of did endorse her. Everything she's saying, I actually agree with, of using your critical thinking skills and wishing that Kamala Harris wasn't arming Israel and all these things, but still voting for Kamala. So fair. However, my biggest issue is how she went about it. Mispronouncing Kamala Harris's name, I think, is a microaggression. And also saying to vote local. She says, use your vote, vote small, vote for what's going on in your city. That's such a very good point. And in any other election, I would say, yeah, usually voting small is more impactful. Not in this election. To not tell people to vote in the presidential election is really damaging. And that's my hot take. Love Chappell. You guys can disagree with me. But I appreciate that she's voting for Kamala, but to not tell people to vote public when you're talking about politics is a little careless. That's my thought. This is why it's so hard to be a celebrity. I totally understand, but you have this huge, huge platform and you have to consider what you're saying and what the impact of it will be. And I just really hope there's people that saw that are hopefully not just going to like not vote in the presidential election, because this is so important. I know she talks about LGBTQ rights and trans kids, and the Democratic Party is not doing enough right now. Trans kids and LGBTQ kids are going to die because of Trump's policies. And the only way that we can make sure that this is a country that would like sees trans and LGBTQ people as people is by voting Kamala Harris, not by staying out of this election. Because staying out of the election, Donald Trump wins. That's just a fact. So that's my hot take. Love you, Chappell. But I think that her words could have been constructed a little bit differently. And I think it's really important for celebrities right now, especially with the disillusionment on the left. And I think it's so fair. Like, Trump has been running for like 10 years now, but we need to remember how important this election is and that it comes down to young people. The election is literally next week, so please vote. And the only way we can push for the changes we want in our government is to have a democracy. And the only way we're going to have a democracy is if Kamala Harris wins. So vote for Kamala. And yeah, next week I'm going to have just a little bit of a shorter episode. It's going to be election day, so I doubt people are going to really want to like listen to Gasp the Pod, but like, go crazy if you want to listen. I'll have like a very short episode. I'm going to be talking about like how Trump and Russia is like possibly paying right-wing influencers. We'll talk about like Bryce Hall and all those motherfuckers. And then we're going to get back into our usually scheduled pop culture. We're not going to use our brains for a few weeks because life has been hard. The election has been weighing on people. Like, things are expensive. Things are crazy. Let's get into some juice. And I have some very exciting guests coming on, some gaylers that you guys might be familiar with from the internet. We're talking literally as I speak about planning our episode. So I'm very excited. I'm also going to have on my friend. We're going to talk about how Leonardo DiCaprio is probably a gay man. So yeah, we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. Please go vote if you haven't. I'm literally about to go return my ballot in the mail. Also, in terms of this podcast, if you've listened to like one or more episodes, let me know what you like, what you don't like. I've made a variety of different types of episodes. As you can see, I wanted to kind of see like what sticks and like what doesn't. So let me know which episode like was your favorite. Yeah, just give me any feedback you can on my TikTok. You can join my Discord, on YouTube comments, anywhere. You can reach me in my link tree. Just let me know what you think. And if you like it at all, please subscribe. I love all of my listeners so much. You guys are the best. Please hit subscribe, even if you don't even use YouTube, even if you don't listen on YouTube, because it makes a huge difference on this being like sustainable. Super excited for next week too. Me and my girlfriend are going somewhere that we can't say yet, but we're very excited. And yeah, see you guys next week. Go vote. Bye, Gaspers.